Okay, so I'm just going to acknowledge up front that breading chicken in flaming hot Cheetos and frying it is a pretty ridiculous thing to do. But here's the thing, it's actually really, really good. I've taken this idea and paired it with an extra spicy flamin' hot Cheetos burger sauce to make an amazing fried chicken sandwich. Come with me on a journey to Spicy Town. Let's get adventurous. We're going to start by preparing some chicken. You can use boneless thighs or breasts for this. Today I'm using chicken breast. These are a couple of chicken breasts from my local supermarket. They often don't do the best job of stripping down the chicken, so I'm just going to inspect this for unwanted bits and give it a bit of a trim. You can see here that there's a bit of a tendon left on there. That's not going to break down during the cooking process and be a bit chewy, so I'm just going to slice that off. I'm also going to trim off some of the dangly bits of fat to keep this nice and neat. These chicken breasts still have the tenderloin attached. There's two main options of how we could approach this. I could cut the main chicken breast in half horizontally at about the same height as the tenderloin to butterfly open the chicken breast. This way we'd have a nice big flat piece that I could probably pound flat and make into 2 fillets for a double sandwich. But today I think I want one big meaty chunk, so I'm actually just going to trim off the tenderloin and put that aside and use it for something else. There's a little point at the end of the breast here, which often has a little bit of cartilage or sinew or a bit of a bloodline attached, so I'm going to use my knife to clean this up a bit too. And my chopping board is slipping around way too much, so I'm just going to wet some paper towel and tuck that underneath. That should keep it nice and secure. I need this chicken breast to cook evenly all the way through, so my goal here is to get one nice even slice of chicken breast. To achieve this, I'm just feeling where the thickest parts of the chicken breast are, and I'm aligning my knife with the thinner part and cutting along the breast so that I end up with a slice of chicken that's an even thickness all the way across. I'm then going to square off the end so that the remaining slice looks like it's about the right size to fill out a sesame seed bun. I'm going to put the offcuts aside. I am planning to use this second chicken breast to make a spicy buttermilk fried chicken sandwich, which is a recipe that I'll post at a later date. And right now I'm thinking that any leftover marinade or dredge from that recipe could be used to turn these offcuts into some really tasty snacks, so they're certainly not going to go to waste. Again, for the second breast, I'm just trimming the fillet horizontally so I get a nice even thickness, and once that's trimmed off, I'm just going to give the remainder a gentle thump to get that to an even thickness too. And once again I'm just trimming what's left into a size that looks like it'll fit nicely on a bun. And now for the main event. I've got myself a party-sized bag of Flamin' Hot Cheetos Puffs. This was the only size that I could find them in, so we'll have plenty for this recipe. And we're going to crush up enough of these to coat our chicken. You can crush these whichever way you like. I'm using a NutriBullet. Once we've added our Cheetos, I'm also going to add a good handful of flour. The oil content in Cheetos is pretty high, so they have a tendency to blitz down into a paste rather than a powder. The flour should help keep everything nice and loose. To this, I'm also going to add about a teaspoon of onion powder, a teaspoon of garlic powder, a generous shake of cayenne pepper, and about 2 teaspoons of smoked paprika. This will give the final mix an even bigger hit of flavour and make sure it's nice and spicy. I'm giving this a bit of a shake around before I blend it to get the flour evenly dispersed between the Cheetos. And then we blend. And you can see I did need to use a little bit of gentle persuasion to make sure everything blended evenly. For the special Cheetos sauce, I'm starting by putting a handful of Cheetos into my mortar and pestle, which is not something I ever thought I'd use my mortar and pestle for, but here we are, and I'm going to crush them into a fine powder. To that, I'm going to bump up the heat even higher with a generous dash of hot sauce. This one has Trinidad scorpion peppers in it, so it's particularly spicy. To add a bit of tang and moisten things up a bit, I'm adding some of the juice from a jar of pickled jalapenos. Then I'm bringing all of that together with a generous squirt of mayonnaise. Crushed Cheetos do have a tendency to absorb a lot of liquid, so as I mix this together I found it to be a bit too thick, so I'm going to continue adding wet ingredients until it's a nice saucy consistency. So that means more pickled jalapeno juice and more mayo. That's starting to look a little bit better. It's still a bit more of a paste than a sauce, but it's heading in the right direction. To dredge our chicken, we're going to start with 1 beaten egg and of course our extra spiced Cheeto dust. So into the egg goes the chicken. Swish that around and get it all nice and coated. Once the chicken is sufficiently eggy, we're going to pull it out and drop it straight into the flour. Make sure it gets really evenly coated in that flour. We don't want any spots that aren't covered. Once that's all evenly coated in flour, it's going back into the egg one last time. This coating of egg and flour and egg again will help even more of the Cheeto dust to stick to the chicken. And finally, the chicken goes into the Cheeto dust. You're going to want to really push the chicken into the Cheeto crumb to make sure as much of it sticks to the chicken as possible. Again, you're going to want to be really thorough when you're doing this. We don't want a single spot of chicken that isn't covered in Cheetos. The Cheetos are going to be the main flavor element for the chicken and also provide a really nice crunchy coating, so make sure as much of it sticks to the chicken as possible. Alright then, I think that's looking good to go. I'm going to pop the chicken aside for now and prepare the salad. Starting off with some fresh crunchy lettuce. I've got a bit of a random selection from my garden, which should provide a nice contrast. Splitting the big leaves down the middle so that the stem isn't too crunchy, and then shredding them all together into even strips. And now I'm going to take a small amount of fresh onion and slice it thinly. I now have all of the remaining ingredients organised, ready to assemble this sandwich. I've got some lovely toasted buns, some nice fresh salad, my crazy Cheetos sauce, and some pickled jalapenos. I'll start by spreading all of that Cheeto sauce onto the buns. It seems to have thickened up a little bit while it was sitting around, but it's still nice and spreadable, and smells awesome. Then I'm dressing the bottom bun with the salad, and carefully balancing the pickled jalapenos on top. Now that everything else is prepared, it's time to fry some chicken. Deep frying at home doesn't come without risks, so I always like to make sure that I've got a fire blanket on hand and I block off the kitchen so no kids or pets can get in. I've got some oil heating up to about 165 degrees Celsius, which is around 330 Fahrenheit. This temperature is a little bit lower than you'd normally use to fry chicken, but because the Cheetos have a fair bit of sugar, they tend to burn quite easily, so I'm keeping it a little bit lower today. Once the oil is up to temperature, you want to gently lower the chicken into the oil, moving it as low as possible before letting it go, and then dropping it away from you, so if there is any splash, it splashes away from you rather than towards you. Leave the chicken undisturbed in the oil for a good few minutes before you touch it with anything. Grabbing it with tongs or moving it around now would likely break off some of the coating, but after a few minutes it should have started to crisp up and will be a bit stronger. After a few minutes, when it's starting to look like it's getting crispy, grab some tongs and carefully flip it over. These kind of tongs are probably the worst kind of tongs for doing this with, because they're hollow and have a kind of channel down the middle. If you're not careful, hot oil can run up them and burn your hand. So if you are using tongs like this, be extra cautious. For chicken to be safe to eat, when it's cooked, it should have an internal temperature of around 75 degrees Celsius or 165 Fahrenheit. I've pulled my chicken out a little bit before it got to this stage, as the residual heat in the chicken will finish it off. For me, this took around 7.5 minutes. Now that that's finished, I'll put it aside on a piece of paper towel to rest and let some of the oil drain off. And wow, is that not the reddest piece of chicken you've ever seen? And now the masterpiece is nearly finished. Gently placing the chicken on top of the salad, trying not to knock out any of the jalapenos, and popping the sauced up bun on top. And that is a thing of beauty. I don't think I've ever seen a piece of chicken quite that red. And this is astonishingly good. I've been wanting to cook this for ages, and to be honest, I was really just doing it for a laugh. I never expected it to actually be as good as it is. The Cheetos are nice and light and crunchy, they're super spicy and have a real tang to them. Those flavors are really backed up by the Cheetos hot sauce, which again, big hit of heat, lots of tang. It all perfectly seasons the meaty, juicy chicken, and that's all balanced out by some light, crunchy salad with a little bit of bite from the onions and another kick of heat and tang from the pickled jalapenos. As silly as this recipe might sound, I really would recommend cooking it. It's absolutely fantastic. If you like the look of this, don't forget to hit the like button and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any future cooking adventures. Happy snacking. Whew, yeah, it's a spicy sandwich.